research usually starts with a good question. In this case, I wanted to know how effective interviews were and what problems were with them, and then I also wanted to think about what possible alternatives there might be or benefits there might be. So I've done my research, asked questions, answered them, and you can see I've got plenty of answers and information here on the notes page that goes above and beyond the ideas that I already had in my head. With this notes page finished, I am ready to go ahead and do my writing. Now, since we're practicing APA for this paper, I gave you an APA sort of document setup here. And APA starts with a cover page. Now, for a student, the cover page is going to look like this. If you were maybe a professor or something publishing some original research you've done, then it would be a little bit different. But this will work for us for now. All right, so first you want to type your title. And the thing is, you haven't written the assignment yet. How do you know what the title is going to be? It might be better to wait till the end to write the title, but the problem is it's very easy to forget it if you wait till the end. So I'm just going to put a title right now that I might change, Beyond the Interview. Then I'll type my name, the school name, the course name, teacher's name, and then the date, written just how you'd normally write a date. And the only reason I point that out is because MLA does it day, month, year. That's all you need on the cover page as a student. You don't need to actually start writing there. If you move to the next page, you're going to have that title one more time, and then this is the page you're actually going to write on. So if you started writing on the title page, just pull that and bring it down to the next page. I'll point out that if you just press enter here, you are going to be centered and bold, and that is not what you want. So again, make sure you're up against the margin and then not bolded, and you're ready to type. Now there's one more thing I'm going to do though before I start writing, and that is I'm just going to take care of my reference page. And this is going to be super duper easy because I very intelligently included references entries as I was going. So I can just take this right here, copy it, and then paste it down here. So easy. Now you want to do a little check to make sure you've got your references page looking right. So first thing, make sure that you've double spaced everything without any extra spaces between entries, and that you haven't included like bullets or little dashes or something to mark these things. This is just the way it looks for APA. It looks kind of boring, but that's the way it looks. Next, make sure you've got your entries in alphabetical order by whatever's first here. And then make sure you've got that hanging indent. So let me show you again how to get that hanging indent if you don't already have it. I've got my sliders right here on the ruler, and if your ruler is not turned on, just go to View, make sure you've got Show Ruler on. Remember that bottom triangle controls, let me just bring it back to the margin. The bottom triangle controls every line in a paragraph except the first line, and that top one controls the first line in a paragraph. And how does the computer recognize a paragraph? Well, every time you hit enter, that makes it a new paragraph. So if you just grab that bottom triangle, and it can be a little tricky if you don't have a mouse, but just give it a couple tries to work. And then you want to grab the top rectangle and pull it back to the margin. And there you go, hanging indent, all taken care of. But as I said, if you press enter, then the computer will recognize that as a new paragraph, and so it's going to look a little wonky, but if that's the case, just make sure again that you backspace so that you're in the same paragraph there. All right, beautiful references list, and do a quick quality control check that you've got last names, first and middle initials, year, month, day, title, publication, and the URL. That's what we need for APA. Before I write, I'm going to go through my research notes and make sure that I have what I need and that I put it in the right order that I want it to appear on my paper. And it's really easy to take something and just drag it around if you think it'll fit somewhere better else. I've already gone through this. I'm pretty happy with the way my notes look, and that means writing it is going to be pretty easy. And indeed it was. I've had to do a couple versions here because my first one was too long. I had too much stuff I wanted to say. So here's my shortest version, and let's take a look at this together and see what can be revised. I want to point out first and foremost that the content is far more important than the fiddly little details of where you put your periods for your citations or whatnot. You need to say something worth saying, something interesting, something that provides good information or gives good insight. Heck, be funny. However, it's pretty easy to get the formatting right, so let's go through and check that right now. So I'm going to start by looking at my references page. Now, anything that's on here needs to be cited in that paper. There needs to be a corresponding in-text citation in that paper. So what I can do to check that, I mean, this is short enough I could just check through it by hand, but you can press Control F, find in the document, and just type the name there. And there you see I've got Chamorro Pre-Music 2018. That looks like a good citation, although my periods shouldn't have that space there. Okay, if I take a look here, I've got Johnson Hess. Again, I can do the same thing. Press Control F. And I've only got that once in here where it is right here on my reference page, which means I haven't actually cited that source. Now that either means I didn't use information from that source at all, in which case I just need to chop this off, or it means I used information from it and I didn't actually cite it. I'm going to do some revisions, so I may actually end up using this source later, so I'm going to just highlight it for now. But if at the end of the paper after I've revised I decide I don't need this at all, then no problem, I'll just cut it off my references list. That won't be hard to do. Okay, so I can do that with each of my sources, and again, if it's a source that it turns out I haven't used, then I can just cut it right off, or in this case I'm going to highlight it, note to self, after I've done revisions if I still haven't used it, to delete. Now you can do a check as well to make sure your in-text citations are correct, and just check the formatting and the punctuation. So remember that we've got two ways that we can do the in-text citation. We can put the writer's name in our sentence like this, in which case the year will go right after in parentheses, John Olmsted in parentheses 2007. Or we can put that information in parentheses, last name, comma, 2007, and of course page number if we have it. So either way works, it just depends on how you want to work your sentence. And a good rule of thumb here with these citations is you want to place them such that it's completely clear to the reader what came from where. Direct quotations always need to be cited. Other information, again, use your good judgment and put that citation where it's going to be clear to the reader where the information came from. As far as punctuation goes, if I've got it tucked here at the end, then my period is going to go to the right of the parentheses. It's not going to be like this, because I'm showing that that citation belongs with that sentence. And if I've got a direct quote, let's see if I can find one here. No, I'll just write one. If I've got a direct quote, then instead of putting the period here, again, the period's going to go right here to the right. We've got to show that that citation belongs with that sentence or belongs with that quote. As I'm writing, if I find I've got some questions, I have no trouble going and doing a little more research. In fact, I did that as I was writing this assignment. I added vocal on. So pretty easy to do if there's something that you find you don't have that you need. I'm going to read through this now, and I'm going to think about where there might be gaps, things where I've left out information that the reader might need to clearly understand my point, or places where maybe I need to develop by giving an example of what I'm talking about. And if I find that I've still got questions, again, I have no trouble doing a little bit more research. All right, let's start. Most of us would hesitate to commit to a long-term relationship on the basis of 1 or 2 30-minute dates, yet in the world of business, employers and job applications do just that. The job interview is a pretty standard part of the hiring process, and yet it's arguably one of the least effective parts of that process. In the first place, interviews don't add much as far as predicting success in the job. A further problem is that even though many people like to believe they're great judges of character, the truth is that almost all individuals fall victim to conscious or unconscious biases, and face-to-face interviews may trigger these biases. Now, reading that loud, I don't know if I like the repetition of the word biases, and I could tinker with the language right now, but before I worry too much about that, I just need to make sure that my content is in place. And in this case, I'm seeing 2 places where I feel like I need to support what I said just a little bit better. So when I say that interviews don't add much as far as predicting success on the job, this is a generic enough statement that I don't know that I mean, do I need to cite that? I think what I'd like to do is put a little more specific fact in there and then cite that. So in this case, I think I'll go back to the Chamorro Pre-Music article, and in fact, I have it here on my notes, and add this idea in. And since I went ahead and put those notes in my own words, then I'm just going to paste it in and just make it work with the sentence in here. Oops, let me paste without formatting so that I get the same font. All right. They only add 4% on top of what you learned from a psychometric test, and 13% if the interview is well structured. Chamorro Pre-Music 2018. In this case, that's definitely worth citing. I've given a specific fact there that supports the point I'm making, and I'm telling you where that came from. So this is no longer just a generic idea. It's no longer just a generic idea. It's an idea that's actually supported with some numbers. And of course, I could go into that more, but it's a short essay. I think that's good enough for now. Okay, a further problem is that even though many people like to believe they're great judges of character, the truth is that almost all individuals fall victim to conscious or unconscious biases, and face-to-face interviews may trigger these. Again, a great place where maybe I need to list some of the biases that people encounter, some research that shows that, and I have found that. One thing, again, that was very interesting was a research study that says they found a sizable beauty premium, meaning that if you're attractive, first of all, you're more confident, but second of all, visual stereotypes about attractive people give you a little bit of edge. I've also read that if you're way too attractive, sometimes that can backfire, but there's a case where we've got this bias. Or maybe I could pull some of these biases that are described in the Undoing Project, where we tend to like people who remind us of ourselves, for example, or we may have stereotypes like Jeremy Lin being passed over because of this stereotype about Asian players. Okay, so this would be a great place right here to maybe add some examples of those biases in. Let's take a look at my second paragraph now. Still, despite the many problems with interviews, they can't be completely scrapped. Okay, I'm happy with that. I've got a transition in, and I think that's going to really clearly lead my reader from the idea about the problems with interviews into the idea that we still need them. Even though interviews may not give businesses the information they really want about candidates, it's a little scary to think of hiring someone sight unseen. After all, the interview may reveal important red flags about a candidate. It's up to the business then to acknowledge that interviews have limitations and to try to figure out how to make them as effective as possible. In order to reduce our unconscious bias in favor of attractive people, hiring managers can conduct blind interviews, for example over the phone, although bias can still be triggered by voices. Recruiters can also remove photos and names from application materials and make sure to assemble a diverse recruiting team. Now, I mentioned this unconscious bias in favor of attractive people, which is something that I may need to bring up here when I talk about examples of bias, so that it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere. Once an interview itself, interviewers can improve outcomes by asking standard questions. Should that be standardized, almost as if they're administering a multiple choice test instead of winging it? Okay, now that's all pretty typical, but I was thinking there might be some more interesting solutions here. And so here's what I have to offer you guys. It's also worth thinking beyond the interview. For many jobs, employers should be able to administer skills tests. Better, after all, to ask welders to show you their welding instead of asking them to talk about welding. In other fields, job shadowing might be useful. John Olmsted has pointed out that many candidates for nursing jobs really don't know what the job entails and would be more than happy to shadow other employees. Because candidates may behave differently while shadowing than while in interviews, employers can ask for input from people the candidate shadowed. And I guess I could add to that the idea that if you were shadowing someone, you'd probably feel more comfortable asking them the questions that you really want to know. Like, what's the atmosphere here? Is the boss nice? Stuff like that. For jobs where candidates seem equally qualified, I'd suggest another approach. Instead of interviewing, arrange an informal chat session that allows both the employer and the potential employees to meet each other and ask unevaluated questions. Then follow the example of Takashi Hashiyama, president of an electronics company in Japan. When he couldn't choose which of two equally qualified auction companies to hire to sell his company's $20 million art collection, he asked the two companies to play a game of rock, paper, scissors and gave the winner the bid. Said Mr. Hashiyama, I sometimes use such methods when I cannot make a decision. This approach acknowledges that sometimes the information we have is not enough and that the outcome may boil down to chance. If hiring managers put the names of qualified applicants into a hat and pull one out, they'd just be acknowledging what the research shows. To some degree, getting a good employer, getting hired for a good job, is just the luck of the draw. The one thing that I might tweak here, in addition to the changes I mentioned otherwise, is that I kind of have this beginning where I talk about committing to a long-term basis, kind of like interviews as being dates. And it might be nice to pick that idea up here in the end. So I'll have to think about whether I can do that to bookend. I'm relatively happy with what I have here at the end though, although I do need to go back through and just make sure that my proofreading is clean and that my language is clear as I can get it. A quick other comment here that I forgot to mention as we were talking about citations. If you are using something from an article where the person writing the article quoted someone else, remember that you'll put as cited in and then the name of the person there. So in the sentence, you know who's saying the quote, it's Mr. Hashiyama. And then you know what article it's in, it's Vogel 2005. And there's more stuff I could say here if I really wanted this paper to get longer. But I'm relatively happy with that. Again, if I were going to develop it more, another thing maybe I would do would be to talk about some of the skill tests that already exist out there. But I've gone over my 2 paragraphs, so for the purposes of this assignment, it's long enough.